Jem is excitement. Ooh, Jem. Jem is adventure. Ooh. Glamour and glitter, fashion and fame.
Okay.
But I sent you the doll sheet that I had, and I
Oh,
figured you
awesome.
wanted it anyway.
Thank you so much. Yeah, these are
Yeah.
what Brian put. Oh, cool.
Well, it's funny. Years ago, we had a stack of toy catalogs from, many years. We got rid of them. And sometime later, a collector told me, do you have any idea what people would have paid for them?
Oh, yeah.
And it's like, what are you going to do? Create a museum?
We have 63 people at the moment. Are we ready to start?
I'm ready
I
when
think
you are.
so. Yeah.
So here they all
I
come.
never would have guessed that. I really wouldn't have.
All right. We're letting them all in. Welcome, welcome.
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
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 I served as design director for the Gem line at Hasbro back in the 80s. I want to thank everybody who's logged on for joining us today. And it's really my pleasure and my honor to be invited to do this. I really didn't realize Gem still had that many fans, but it warms my heart to know that some things I worked on in the past are still meaningful to people. So it really is my honor to be here. And I'll just give you a little background about myself, and then we can go to questions. My background is actually industrial design. I studied at Rochester Institute of Technology. And because I always enjoyed working in fabric, I combined my educational background with my love of fabric. And I don't know exactly where to start other than to let you know that when I first started at Hasbro, it was in an era when husbands and wives were not encouraged to work together. There was a lot of hang up about a married couple working together. And I was an in-house freelancer at Playskool in Chicago prior to Hasbro when my husband was a manager of design there. And they physically moved me to the other end of the building because I was his wife. So when I started at Hasbro, I wasn't allowed to work in research and development, being a spouse. And I started in sales promotion, where we created the catalogs and sell sheets and all for marketing and sales to use. And then eventually I did transition to research and development. And I guess they were a little uneasy about it at first, but I worked on one end of the building, and my husband Steve was senior design director of boys' toys at the time, and he was down at the other end. So it all went fine, and hopefully we broke some barriers by proving that married people really can work together. So I like to think of Gem as the girl that gave me my start. When I joined the plush group, I was assigned to Gem initially, and I joined other people working on it, and I promoted to senior designer, and then they made me design director for one group within the plush group. And I noticed my friend Lanja Miller has joined us. She was a design director in the New Jersey satellite group, and they did most of the licensed plush for Hasbro at the time. So hi, Lanja. And maybe she'll have something to add that I've overlooked. Anyway, there were 4 design directors in plush at Hasbro. And then Lanja's group was the 5th group, but certainly a very vital one to the organization. And my responsibility was to oversee all the development of doll fashion assortments marketed under both Hasbro and Playskool. So Gem was just the first in a line for me. And I've gone on to freelance for many toy companies. I still do, although at my age now, it's more on a part-time basis. So that's just a little bit of my background, and I'm happy to answer whatever I can about the Gem fashions.
Carla, do you want to do a slideshow of your photos right now and then ask some questions?
If you'd like to, I just provided a very few examples of the kind of work I do, and that'll help the people understand that folks like myself and Lanja, who's with us tonight, we take ideas from sketch phase through to prototyping and pattern making. And many of the things you see in the photos are actually the prototypes that are eventually manufactured. These are just a few fashion dolls here. Obviously, you recognize the two gems. They were two of my designs, and I did prototype designs other people did as well. There's the Little Mermaid. I did a lot of work on that line in the 90s, and The King and I was for Playmates toys.
Now I'm having a problem. Let's see. There we go.
I'm the person behind nearly every American Girl sewing pattern that was produced by Simplicity Sewing Patterns. Since that time, Simplicity has been sold, and it now belongs to a British company. My friend Lanja, who's on with us, and myself, and many other people that, a lot of us toy people, did work for Simplicity as freelance designers. And this is just one example, but some of my work is still in their catalog. These were produced for Magic Attic Club. They were a competitor to the American Girl. As to the company, it escapes me at this point, but many times I was given the more difficult costumes to prototype, and I really do like them because it's like solving a puzzle. This is a pattern for Simplicity where I developed what they would call a refreshing of Raggedy Ann. And I'm kind of fond of the pattern because I have a cat named Raggedy Ann. So it all works for me. So these are my actual prototypes in the photography. Let's see here. The one at the top is a porcelain doll that was done for Franklin Mint. And my job there was to create the body that is soft and the limbs and the neck and head all attached to it. And then I prototyped the costume. The one at the bottom was a concept for Hasbro. As to what they used it for, I don't know. Obviously, it's Little Red Riding Hood. And the one on the right was, what was her name? Anne Geddes, I believe. Yep. Yeah, and we were working on concepts of her photography for dolls.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah. This is another pattern for Simplicity, and they were supposed to be a generic version of Manhattan Toys Groovy Girls that were popular at one time. This was featured on their Christmas catalog. And this was a lot of fun. From time to time, there were properties for Marvel and Disney and other companies that I got to work on, and you all recognize Finding Dory. And I also did the third character, Destiny, the whale shark, but it didn't fit in the pattern. So too many tissue papers. And a number of years ago, I bought a cat head purse, and it was a Japanese company that manufactured it. And I got so many compliments that I kept hounding Simplicity that you really need to do something like this because, you know, people are always stopping me in public and asking me about the purse. So they finally decided on doing it, and this is my version of animal bags.
Very cool. Oh, and here, this is, I forced this in. This is Maxie.
Okay. This is Maxie, correct. Maxie was a concept brought to Hasbro by Judy and Artie Albert, who were very big toy inventors. it's my understanding they've both passed on. And at the time, they had people working for them that prototyped many, many very, very cute outfits. Unfortunately, when they turned them over to Hasbro, they didn't come with any sewing patterns. So we had to start from scratch. Oh, you have other pages of Max.
Yeah, this is the second year. So these are ones that were never actually produced.
Okay.
So
Now, if you go back one page, keep going. This page, I would like to mention that this assortment was developed by one of the designers in my group. Her name is Donna Goes, Goes. And Donna came from the fashion background, and she came up with this where there were all kinds of pieces that you could use all different ways. And I don't know how children received it, but we all thought it was a very clever idea. And Donna was certainly one of the main creative people in my group, although there were others too, which I will mention later.
very cool.
Yeah.
I will just, there's things we could have had. And by the way, I stole these from Brian Shepard's website, which he's probably saying in the chat, which I can't see right now because I'm sharing the screen. So Brian, thank you for letting me, even though you didn't know, steal your pictures. I'm not selling anything.
We have Brian to thank for getting Carla on the
Yeah.
JemCon radar. So thank you, Brian.
Yeah.
Well, I owe Brian a lot of thanks. He was first in touch with me several years ago, and we have communicated back and forth over the years, and I hope one day we can meet, but he certainly warms my heart with all his enthusiasm. So thank you, Brian. This is Star Trek, which was done by Playmates. My husband and I did nearly the whole product line for them in the 90s. And what you see here, the upper left are the 12-inch collectible figures, and the lower ones on the right are the 9-inch. And I provided the control drawings of the figures. I have nothing to do with the facial sculpts at all, but I probably did about 75 costumes for them. And then the plush character is wired inside, and he's posable.
Oh, very
So Star Trek was a very big part of my life for a while.
And we have more. No, it's Star Wars. Oh,
It's Star Wars, yeah, which was Hasbro. And I did more costumes than what's shown here, but I did the plush and then some of the outfits.
That Watto beanie is just something I had never seen before, and it's, given the character, it's just rather adorable. So
I still have him in my studio, as a matter of fact. And my husband has an early version of him in his studio.
Oh, very
But they never produced anything as detailed, but they asked for it to be made the way I did it. But then what they eventually produced was very simplified,
okay.
you know.
Well, I'm going
We
to
have
stop.
lots of Maxi, Star Wars, and Star Trek fans in the group. So I don't know if you can see the comments in the chat box, but everyone is just
I don't
geeking out hardcore right now, just to let you know.
I don't see the chat box at all. I'm trying to follow the pictures.
Yeah, we'll follow the chat for you. So
Okay.
I'm just going to run through a couple of them. So I'll speak for people. Damien asks, how many of the gem designs were inspired by real fashions of the time?
Well, I think a lot of them were, to be honest. We all followed fashion and movies and so forth. I do know that the girls group, which was a plastic group as compared to our fabric group, if you will, that group was headed by Mo Patterson, and under Mo was Roseanne Radozovich, and Roseanne was the doll maven. So Roseanne's group was responsible for the design of the costumes that were sold on the dolls. My responsibility were the fashion assortments. So I hope that you can contact Roseanne at some point. I'm sure she'd be very interesting to have on the convention as well.
Ah.
But I do know that they had quite a library of current styles and so forth. So yes, a lot of it did come from, you know, real life. However, there's a few, I need my crib sheet here, excuse me. There's a few I did that I did strictly just because that really didn't come from fashion. Such as in the Smashin' Fashions, the Misfit group, Gimme, 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 and Winning is Everything are two of my designs. And they just kind of, oh, I'm sorry, not Winning is Everything. You Can't Catch Me. I'm looking at the wrong side. I don't know, that just came from me. But a lot of them really did come from current fashion at the time, yes.
And there was a related question I pretty much covered, but were there any designers that you know of that people went to specifically and said, hey, look at this thing I saw? Or is that just not, I mean, professional designers, I would assume, really don't want to be copying people that much.
When you refer to designers, are you talking about, did we consult with, say, for instance, Calvin Klein or, no, not directly. But there is a woman I do want to mention who was very involved in GEM, although she did not work for Hasbro. Her name is Patti Wagner Miller. Patti was a professional bridal designer, and her background was, I believe, with Priscilla of Boston. And she was a friend of the marketing vice president, Maureen Souza. And Maureen brought Patti in. She was a very striking woman, always wore leather suits. And Patti provided a lot of sketch work that contributed to GEM. She did no prototyping for us, no sewing, but strictly sketch work. And with her fashion background, yes, you know, I would consider her an outside designer that we consulted, yes.
Very cool. Let's see, who was your favorite GEM character to design?
Well, I didn't design any of the dolls, so I can't take any credit for that at all. You know, that would be more of a question for the girls group and Roseanne, if you get in touch with her.
All right. And so another one that I'm thinking, well, I don't know, we're going to ask it. Were you at all involved in sourcing the fabrics? And if so, what is that process like?
Well, we actually had a woman in-house. Her name is Joanne Visco Kunitz. She has sent, Kunitz being her married name, she married one of the fellows in the boys' toy group. And Joanne was our sourcing person. She did make a trip to Asia at one point to bring back unusual fabric technology. And she kept a whole room of fabrics. She did a beautiful job organizing them and keeping them. And, you know, we were able to utilize a lot of the newer technologies because of her efforts. We also got a lot of samples in from Asia that many times were done earlier for Mattel. And then we would see it the following year because Mattel, I don't know if it's still true, but at one time, Mattel was the largest producer of apparel in the world. And obviously that's Barbie. Yeah. So through the Barbie demands and needs of Mattel, we also kind of got on that bandwagon and were able to glean information.
Very cool. We have so many questions just in the chat. I'm trying to keep up. Let's see. The question that I'm seeing in a couple different ways is, in the design process, which came first? Was the cartoon first or were the fashions first? Who was instructing who? And then commentary on why that ties into why colors were changed for certain fashions. If you could talk about that.
Now, the cartoon show was created by the ad agency for Hasbro, which the name was Griffin Bacall. You may have seen in the news, Joe Bacall has passed on in recent years. Griffin Bacall was the developer for all of the cartoon show information. We in research and development have nothing to do with that whatsoever. You know, we would see clips of it from time to time when we certainly saw the commercials for the products. I think basically Griffin Bacall had images of what we were working on. So you see a lot of the fashions in the animation, but then the animators added some of their own because the timing didn't always align. And as to their schedule versus the development of the toy schedule, I really can't tell you exactly how that was, but that's why you see them in different colors, or you see different outfits than what was available for the toys.
Cool. I think that's been a big question for a lot of people over the years. Right. There's a sort of a related, were all fashions supposed to appear in the cartoon at one point or another? Or were there some that were just doll things?
I really don't know, to tell you the truth. I think they would have liked to have had them all in the show to promote sales of the toys, naturally, but it may have been a timing issue where certain things hadn't been decided upon and they had to wrap up the episodes of the show before marketing decided exactly which fashions they were going to go with.
Yeah. Okay. I'm kind of mixing some questions together here. So did they give you a specific number of fashions to design? And related to that, are there any unproduced fashions that you can talk about, and anything that might have been vetoed? The questions are specifically because it was too adult or too risque.
I don't think anything was ever vetoed for it being too risque or adult. You know, we were careful to keep within what, you know, natural guidelines in that arena. But we did have some assortments slated to go if Gem had continued, which due to sales, I suppose, that was the reason. I had left the company before the end of Gem. So we had a lot of work developed, but, you know, I think when sales weren't what they hoped for at that point, that it was just dropped for that reason.
Okay. And we had a question that I've heard, it's a kind of an urban legend thing. There is very little to no red in the Gem line. I have always thought that was because that was just the palette of the 80s.
Marketing didn't like red. They felt red did not sell.
Red doesn't sell, hey.
And it's interesting because in the 80s with girls' products, it was pink, lavender, and aqua. And I think things have really opened up since that time. And I do know that the girls group fought for a number of things on other doll lines that included black and red and colors you don't often see. And, you know, it's just, these companies are marketing driven, and those are the folks who deal with the buyers and they deal with sales, and they give their comments based on what they believe will sell the best.
Cool, that's good to know.
We did try to do, I shouldn't say we, but Roseanne's group did try to do a Gem in a red dress. They wanted to do a red dress for her, and they went as far as acquiescing to the point of making it a very pinky red, like a more of a cherry red. And it was gorgeous, but, you know, for whatever reason, I never saw it, and I assume they never produced it.
People are asking about whether you have any drawings or other depictions of any fashions that were designed but were not produced.
I wish I did, but, you know, this is going back several decades now. Oh, look, I see one being held up there, bell pepper. Hello.
Yep, yep.
I don't have any anymore. I mean, they really were property of Hasbro. And I've always taken those kind of confidentialities very seriously. And when I left the company, I left all that behind. You know, it belonged to them. So no, I don't.
Okay. Let me do one or two more kind of generic questions, and then we've actually got two people that I think I would like to let you talk to. Look at me with my power here. So there was a question, how does your department work with, if you did, with the package illustrators? Was that siloed or was that a close relationship?
I wouldn't say it was close. That would be more that marketing would be more involved with that, because with any packaging, you're dealing with real estate in a store. And for those people who are not familiar with it, when you go to any big store, let's use Walmart as an example, excuse me, they receive, it looks like a view of the shelf looking at it. It's called a planogram, and it slots in exactly where they have to put every package. So it all boils down to shipping of the product, how many they can get per carton. I assume weight is part of that, but certainly it has to do with real estate in the store. Okay. And that's something the designers of the products really don't get involved with that much. Unless maybe if it's let's say it's a toy truck and it's going to open up and do something. You know, they have to display what it's going to do on the package, but the package can't be so large that it doesn't work with the planogram. So that's really a whole nother department's issue.
And the packaging changed later on, right? Yeah. We had Sharon Nettle a few years ago who did the wonderful artwork for the packaging. And then we also had Ruth Bush last year, who also did some of the illustrations for the posters and the accessories.
Right. Yeah. And beyond the actual physical packaging and the practical things, what was your relationship with the actual illustrators? Were they looking at your stuff? Were you looking at their stuff?
We did have some relationship with illustrators. We often used a woman who was freelance at the time. Her name was Judith Nelson from Massachusetts. And she was a marvelous artist as well. She did a lot of renderings for us that we would use in product presentations prior to going to a prototype stage. So she would do lovely, usually gouache and pencil illustrations on board, and they would be done from our sketch work. And then it would give people a very clear understanding of what the actual prototype was going to look like. Yeah. But we didn't get involved with the posters or the packaging illustration or anything like that.
Okay. One more quick question, and well, it's two questions really. What was your favorite gem fashion that you designed, or that someone else designed that you liked?
Oh boy, I knew someone was going to ask that. I suppose the glitter and gold ones would have to be the two that were on my sheet earlier. The Gold Rush was a favorite of mine, but that was one of my own. And I really liked You Can't Catch Me because it was so different. And I liked There's a Melody Playing. And I also did the Rock and Curl.
Oh, yeah. We talked about that a little in our prep chat.
Yeah, the Rock and Curl, I don't really remember what the circumstances were, but the girls group came running in one afternoon and said, we got to have a dress for the doll in like 2 hours. Can you come up with something really quickly? And I just took care of it, and I didn't have a whole lot of time to put a lot of thought into it. So it was a crash and burn, as we call it.
Well, it got the job done. The other question is related. Outside of Jem, what was the favorite toy item that you designed?
Oh boy, that's tough. I don't know. I've worked on many, many doll lines over the years. I don't know if I can answer that. I mean, I love them all for different reasons.
That is a good answer. So
It's the best I can give you, really. But only Jem, really got me started. So I have a special place in my heart for her.
And so I've got a couple people that I think would probably like to talk to you. So earlier today, we talked to Alain from Integrity Toys. And so I'm going to ask Alain to unmute.
Oh, how nice.
Hi, Carla. How you doing?
I'm very well. How are you?
I'm good. I guess you probably don't know who I am, but I'm the guy who's redoing your work right now. It's such an honor.
Well, it's an honor that someone cares enough about it to keep it going. And I, along with many others, I'm sure, thank you very much for that.
Yeah, I mean, I have so many questions. It's not even funny. I asked one, and you answered it already about like the order that the fashions were built in. But it's funny. Like you were just mentioning that you did Rock and Curl. Have you seen the Rock and Curl that we just did? Like
I have, yes. Thanks to Rachel and Liz. Yes, I have seen it. It looks great.
Yeah, like we were doing like so much research. Like you were talking about fabrics before and all that kind of stuff. Like it's just it's fascinating to know how things were done back then versus like how we're doing it now. Like we go to Guangdong, like we go to China directly to source all of our fabrics. Like we tried to have like stuff in house, but I never even realized that Hasbro had like a whole department that was just fabric. Like I would have loved
it was like a glorified office. I mean, it wasn't a whole department, but as to whether they have that today, I have no idea, but they did when I was there.
No, thank you. Like your work is amazing. Obviously, I grew up with all the work that you did. I didn't even know. I own a whole lot of the Star Trek and God knows how many Star Wars things in my collection. Like you can see I'm kind of a Star Wars fan there. So that makes it even more special to know that the person who worked on the stuff I love as a child also did the stuff as I love as an adult. Like that's just incredible. Thank you so much.
And I don't have children, so it's important to both me and my husband that, what we've done means something to other people that played with it,
Yeah. Oh my God, you're going to make me cry. Oh.
Well, my husband actually is one of the G.I. Joe characters, and we do get products sent to us from all over the place asking for his signature on it. If anybody is a G.I. Joe fan, you can look up the character Slipstream and
I know
my husband's face.
The pilot of the Conquest X-30 jet. Like that's really
That's
creepy that I know
exactly
that.
right. Yep. So
Okay.
he was recognized by a child one time. That was really a hoot.
Oh,
Wow.
It was really funny. Yeah.
Okay. Wow. Cool. Well, it's a pleasure. I hope we get to touch base at some point. That would be great. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. I'm usually here working or, working on something of my own or working for a company or something. So I'd be more than happy to talk to you.
Maybe we
Great.
can get both of you guys to come to an in-person JemCon at some point. Old
That would
meets
be
new.
fun.
Yeah, this is the first time we've had either of you guys as guests, and we weren't planning on doing it virtually, but I can see the reactions in the boxes. Everyone is just like, I see a smile after smile after smile. So it is so great to have both of you guys here right now. You have no idea.
Well,
Oh my God,
it
means
does
a
our
lot.
hearts good too, because, it's like you get to leave a little bit of yourself behind maybe.
100%. I agree. And it's such a, people I think don't view toys as, let's say, a movie star or somebody who wrote a really influential book or everything. But I actually think that what we do in the toy industry, because we're helping children, like we're being incorporated into children's lives at such a young age, we do have a huge influence on,
Yeah.
and people remember that. Look, we're all here today, like we're in our 40s, our 50s, and we've grown up with all of that stuff, and it's still those characters live in my heart like every day. So it's definitely important. I think we're leaving something behind that I think generations will definitely be remembering. Absolutely.
That's very true. And, for instance, when Maxie was brought to Hasbro by the Alberts, I remember playing with toys they invented from years before that. And
do you have an example, just out of curiosity, like what they were doing? Like, are there any brands that they would have done that we would know, like specifically?
Oh yeah. In fact, my husband could tell you more because he's worked for more toy companies than I have. But a lot of the Ideal products, like Tammy, who was like a Barbie. I'm really dating myself here, but I had Tammys and Barbies, but I think they did Kissy, who was a doll that when you brought her hands together, she would give you a kiss. There's got to be many, many toys they brought in as inventors, but it was just interesting to see them come in as older people with something that we worked on and be able to remember playing with things they did.
Can I just ask one quick question about like the fashions? Were there like specific things that you guys were given commands by the ad agency to say, hey, this is featured in this episode, we need it made as a toy? Did that ever happen?
Not to my recollection at all, no.
Okay.
I think they basically were given copies of sketches or presentation renderings or photos of prototypes and told to meld them into the cartoon show. Okay. And then the episodes I have seen, which I hate to admit, but are very few, I noticed a lot of fashions that were totally new to me. I had never seen them before.
No, the only reason why I'm asking is because sometimes we try to interpret what the fashion, because we're trying to keep, like, that's what I was saying when we did the other presentation, we're trying to keep a balance between what was done for the toy line and what is done for the show, to try to keep those things and those characters be as authentic as possible as to what we fans would love to see the dolls wearing today in 2020. And I'm never sure what came first, basically, like the apple or the orange or like whatever. So like that's actually really, so basically the show really was a promotion for the toy line, and that's it. Yes,
I mean, I don't know if everybody at Hasbro would appreciate my saying that, but in that era, the cartoon shows were really long ads for product. And it didn't matter whether it was Gem or G.I. Joe or Masters of the Universe or, any company's products. They really were to build the characters and build the play pattern and certainly build sales. Yeah, so,
I appreciate how there was a lot of thought being put into everything you guys did at the time, also to create lifestyle brands where like it wasn't just working on the toys, it was also building what you were doing to make it into all the peripherals, the things that were like a little girl or a little boy could live in the Gem world in their bedroom, basically. Sure. And that still happens, but I feel it was something that was very typical to the 80s. It's where it started, and it helped what you guys were doing, I think.
Well, it probably goes back a lot further. I don't know where I heard the story, but back when, again, dating myself, when the Flintstones, for instance, were on television, someone from Ideal Toy Company was in touch with Hanna-Barbera and the owners of the characters and said, you need to make Fred and Wilma's child a female because I could sell a ton of dolls if it turns out to be a girl child. And that's why Pebbles Flintstone was a girl.
Interesting.
And that never occurred to me, or I guess if I had reason to think about it, maybe I would have thought it. But there's an example of where the toy company had the leverage to say, here, you know, you're going to get all these royalties if you make the character a girl, and therefore we can put out a very popular doll to go with it.
Very interesting.
We
Yeah.
actually have a related question on that that ties in with what the two of you are talking about right now. Someone had asked in the chat, I imagine a number of sketches were made, but how is it determined which would actually get produced? Did they tell you we want a specific number of dresses or pants in the assortment? So just definitely a lot more interest in figuring out, obviously the fashions were produced first and then ended up in the cartoon, but definitely some interest in learning more about how the fashions that were ultimately chosen to get produced.
That's a good question. Actually, when we were at Hasbro, Hasbro was a family company. And at the time, the chairman was Stephen Hassenfeld. And Stephen ran the company like a big family. He was a wonderful man. And he, with every person hired, you would be photographed, and he would make notes about you and your family, and he kept a record of every single person that worked for him. And you know, whenever we would see Stephen in the hallway, he would stop and ask after your family members and ask how your favorite hobbies and interests were going. And you really felt wanted, you felt cared for, and it was a wonderful thing to have someone like that. So mainly we had presentations in levels, and it would start with an R&D presentation where we would present just to the other designers. Then we would have a marketing presentation, and we'd get feedback from all the people in marketing. And then it would move up to the management, the big, you know, meeting. And Stephen would sit right in the middle, and all of the vice presidents and, you know, higher ups of the company would be there. And they basically, we'd bring out our work, and they would be there. I like this, I don't like that. I'd like this better if it was pink or whatever. And we would all move ahead based on the feedback. So
were you doing focus groups in front of children also?
There were focus groups. We didn't have anything to do with them as designers.
Because
Probably
I've
done
done
with
those.
marketing.
Yeah, I've done those, like sitting behind like a glass window when I used to work for Mega Blocks, where like we had like a bunch of children. That's actually kind of a funny story. We had a bunch of children that would come in, and then the design department would show up with these like really complicated like sets that were built out of bricks and everything, and they would put them on all these tables. And then there was a plastic lawnmower, and all the kids like would not go for the construction sets. Like they would just go nuts with the lawnmower. It's a stupid plastic lawnmower that did bubbles when you pushed it. There was like soap bubbles coming out of it, and that was like the big hit. Like we could have had a whole room full of the lawnmower. The children were fighting over it, and we were like, okay, we just spent like, why didn't anyone take the damn lawnmower out? We're all we wanted feedback on these other toys. Somebody forgot the lawnmower in the damn like focus group room. It was actually really hilarious. So we wasted like a whole focus group, and the lawnmower was the big hit.
That's a good story. As for how Hasbro did it, I think they hired that out because we didn't actually have an area with a one-way mirror, at least not one I knew of. And, you know, I'm sure it was done by an outside agency, but yes, they did have focus groups.
Cool. I have one question from Davide, and then I'm going to let you talk to Brian. So,
oh, great.
Davide asks,
we finally meet.
Yes. What was the overall trust in the Gem brand back then? Some former employees have said they never really knew how to approach it up to these days.
That's a really good question. The only comment I can really think of is that Hasbro is credited for bringing Barbie back. And I think the feeling about that was really, really split, because a lot of us thought it would be safer to make the doll the same size as Barbie so you could share fashions and so forth. But I think at the time, marketing felt that it would be better to make her more articulated and larger and more realistic a body figure. That was a big issue then. Not the exaggerated figure of Barbie, if you will. I have to say though, from my perspective, I might be trailing off the subject a little here, but the one thing that always worked for Barbie, the exaggerated figure helped maintain the outfits on the figure. Jem having a more girlish figure, if you will, and less bosom and so forth, certain styles didn't stay up on the doll very well. And this was the era before they had clear elastic, where you could add straps and nobody would notice them, you know. Plus, I think with Barbie, her tiny little waist and all allowed the bulkiness of human size fabric still look like a fashion drawing on her, where Jem tended to look a little bit fuller once the clothes were on her. And, you know, I always regretted that when they sculpted the body, they didn't consult with the fabric people first, because those are the kind of issues that only the people doing the fashions would be really sensitive to, I think. As for, you know, the whole thing about trust in Jem, you know, I really don't know how to answer that. I applaud Hasbro for trying it and for the fact there are still fans, but I think they went up against a very, very difficult competition. And ditto for Maxi. You know, it's just the thing that Barbie was around for so long and was such a part of American life that's a tough nut to crack, no matter how you look at it.
Yeah.
I was just thrilled to work on it, and whether or not I don't think trust entered into it for me. I was just happy to be doing what I was doing.
Cool. I'm going to ask Brian to unmute.
I am unmuted.
Yay!
Now I've got to find your picture, Brian.
There he is.
There he is.
There I am.
Hey, we finally meet. Hi.
Hi. How are you doing?
I'm doing just fine. How about yourself?
Doing good. So exciting to actually get to talk to you.
Oh, and to you as well, Brian. I owe you a lot of thanks for getting me involved. And
You're welcome.
I always look forward to your emails because it gets me a chance to go down memory lane a little bit. Thank you.
Well, I'm glad to do that. Speaking of which, do you remember the international fashions?
Yes, I do. That was a concept. I wasn't there at the time that they may have been prototyped, but it was talked about when I was there, and we talked about doing an around the world tour for her and, you know, stuff like that. But in the earlier time of Jem, it was kind of thought of as you don't send characters around the world unless you're running out of material. You know, like on TV shows, they send people off to Hawaii on a vacation because, you know, they don't have anything to do in their home setting anymore. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think you had shared with me earlier sadly about Carly Hoff's passing. For everybody else, Carly was a member of my design team. And it was Brian who told me she had passed on. And she had worked on a whole set of kind of masquerade items for Jem. And frankly, I never really encouraged her because I didn't think marketing would like it. But she was very bullheaded about it, and she went ahead and sculpted all these little masks and stuff, and they matched the outfits and so forth. And they actually loved her work, and they proved me wrong on that one. And those didn't get produced either. But you know, she did have some very imaginative things to add.
Yeah, she did. So you were talking about Donna Goes earlier. Didn't
Yep.
she also do the matching melody? Kind of headed that up, or?
She might have after I left. You know, when you leave, no one talks about what they're doing anymore because of confidentialities. But, you know, at some point during our discussion, I'd really like to name everybody on the design team because they all worked very hard and were talented people. She may have done that. You know, I don't know.
We actually have, sorry to interrupt, Stefan calling in from the Netherlands has some of the Polaroids, I believe, of those fashions that Carly designed. I don't know if we want to unmute him and spotlight him just so we can share it with everyone.
You can, but that, you know, and I'm not saying you shouldn't, but those things never should have been shared with anybody because they are property of Hasbro. And I kind of learned through the grapevine that she was showing things that really shouldn't have been shown to people because of a letter of confidentiality. And I'm glad it never caused her any trouble, but you know, those kind of things, it doesn't matter now, obviously, because they're not producing Gem, but that would not have been an action I would have supported, you know.
I totally
Do we
understand.
totally understand? Do we
Yes.
maybe want to let Stefan at least ask a question then, even if we're not comfortable sharing the
Absolutely.
photos?
Absolutely. I don't want to be, you know, the wet blanket on,
No, not at
on
all.
showing it. I think those actions really shouldn't have happened. And there was a time when we had to scale down employees in the group, and Carly was one that was dismissed. Certainly not due to her creativity or anything. It was just we didn't need that many people in the group anymore, and she was one of the newer hires. So I don't know if she didn't understand that you don't show those things or what, but you know, that's my 2 cents anyway.
I just want to say it's such an honor to have you here.
Oh,
And this has been the highlight of this JemCon for me.
thank you.
I was really looking forward to meeting you in person.
Oh,
So I hope you're going to be there next year.
I would love to, and I'm hoping that maybe there'll be a JemCon on the East Coast. I live in New Hampshire, and
Well, I travel from Europe every year to go to
Oh.
JemCon. So, you know, it's
oh, bless your heart. Well, you know, we as Americans are touched by that. I'm sure I speak for everybody.
and you have so much information. You could fill a whole weekend with your knowledge. So.
Well, I really hope that Rachel and Liz can find some of the folks I've mentioned to them, because
Carly's got the hookup.
yeah, I'm only
We're working
one
on it,
piece of
guys.
the puzzle. And
Thank you to Brian, of course.
Yes.
if we could get a whole panel of people, it would be great. I know
Oh yes.
that would be wonderful.
That would be amazing.
Yes.
Hasbro had a gathering of 2 or 3 years ago called HasCon, and they did it in Rhode Island. And my husband went down for it, and I think it was more geared at the boys' toy side, but I might be mistaken. But you know, you could certainly get a whole panel of people from the Gem days. And I love your collection in the background.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well, if you can see the two in the foreground, those are two prototypes.
Oh, okay. Oh, I see. Oh, nice.
This
It's
is like,
definitely the colors and everything too.
and it's this is an original prototype. It's a hand painted fabric.
Oh, wow. Oh, it's lovely. Did you make that?
No, it's an original.
Well, that must be a highlight of your collection then.
Yes, it is.
Yes.
It is.
Oh, that's great. Well, it's an honor to meet you as well.
It's an honor to meet you. Yeah, you have no clue. Oh my God.
Oh. Well, I would love to return sometime and, meet everybody in person. That would be lovely. I would just like to name the people that were in my group, just because, I don't know if you'll be able to locate all of them, but I mentioned Donna Goes, of course, Shelley Reed Smith, Charlotte Katowski, Diane Prendergast, and I mentioned Carly Hoff, who sadly is no longer with us, John Cady, who did a lot of our fabric art for us at the time. This is pre-computer days, folks, and Pam Sisk.
Thank you so much. A minute. Thank you all, and see you in a bit.
Thank you,
Carla.
Carla.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. A lot. So much.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Carla.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Be well.
Glamour and glitter.